would you start Stack Marketer again today?
That's a really good question. When starting Stack Marketer, there was not even marketing group. Now, there's quite a few of other pretty solid publications. Would you start another one? The competition is higher. Monetizing might take longer, so you have to get more creative with how you monetize. We got very lucky with the fact that people who control these marketing budgets from sponsors read our newsletter, so people underestimate how good that is for someone like myself back then who doesn't know about how to do newsletter ad sales or anything like that.
Okay, so we are back and we have a special guest with us. We have Manu from Stack Marketer. He is one of my favorite founders in the newsletter space. We've known each other, I think, for a couple of years now. And I always look to him for, I would say, very blunt but very useful advice, some occasionally controversial hot takes, but always, I think, relevant, and more often than not ends up being proved out right. So I'm excited to have him talk newsletters, talk Stack Marketer, talk some interesting stuff there. And I think, Tyler, one thing since we recorded our last episode has been, we've got a lot of feedback on our episode on Substack and their raise of $100 million and what their plans are next. So I thought, while we have Manu here, Manu, you've obviously seen the news about Substack raising $100 million. Any sort of like instant hot takes? Are you taking Stack Marketer there, doing something with Substack?
Funny thing is, I only saw it very recently, so I didn't manage to check into details, because my first question is, what was the valuation for the 100 million raise? Because I remember Substack did before they'd raise some money, then they also open it up to their users. And obviously, I mean, I think that was pretty much consensus from other founders that the valuation is pretty high for you to make money anymore. And I'm assuming it's similar this time around, or?
Yeah, they had a good valuation. They were at 1.1 post money. So they gave away about 10% for the 100 million, which is, I mean, it's so difficult, right? You look at, who was it a couple of years ago? We've seen some media companies raise at like $4 or $5 billion valuations when they're literally just like a blog and like a couple of 100,000 subscribers on an email list. So compared to that, it's very, very, very reasonable. Compared to some other things that we've seen raised, maybe a little bit ambitious, but I'm positive.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you remember that the show Silicon Valley, where it's like, okay, it's kind of absurd, but actually has enough touch with reality, or like what certain things you've heard from Silicon Valley in reality as well. That pre-revenue thing, I think, was a thing with a lot of companies a few years ago. Like, no. If you have some revenue, it's never enough. Just zero revenue, and you can be valued at you can get a higher valuation that way, because then you don't get valued on revenue. So I think like a few companies had that. But yeah, with Substack, I mean, 10% for 100, well, a bit less, right? Because if it's 1.1 post money, it's like 9 point something percent or whatever. Doesn't sound awful, but at the same time doesn't sound great. So I mean, at the end of the day is like, if people invested, I guess they think it's right. But I would say it's tricky.
What about you as a newsletter operator? Like, do you look over at the people who are building huge newsletters or I shouldn't say newsletters, who are building huge followings?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they're not building newsletters, and not only newsletters. So of course they have a newsletter too. And last time I checked, it's like there's not enough substance for the like stats of it. There's not enough like their growth, or like the newsletter growth on Substack, is kind of just driven by their recommendation engine for the most part. I'm not sure how easy it is to track if you want to do like Facebook ads or anything like that. I mean, they might have done some upgrades since I last checked them like a year ago. But the thing is, if they didn't have it a year ago when they're still like in the hundreds of millions valuation, I don't know what changed, if they've doubled their valuation since then. But yeah, like it seemed more like every publisher who's going there, they might have some benefits, but they're essentially building Substack. They're not building their own brand. That's my feel. Like their whole ecosystem thing, where they lure you in with some good incentives, like it's free if you don't charge money, and yada yada, all of these things. But then in the end, it's like, well, okay, how many of those people who are on your list are actually real? How do they engage? How do you, the ads thing, where Substack was they don't sell ads, but now they kind of tested out some stuff, and we'll see how that goes. And all of these things, it's like you're building Substack's product. You're not building your own media company enough. I mean, of course, if you're the top 1% of, journalists or just publisher in general, you can do that, especially if you already have an existing following. But if you're building from scratch, I'm not so confident about Substack being the place to start. especially when we look into, how difficult it is even with other platforms to really exclude what's like trash traffic and bots and fake engagement from the real kind. So if Substack doesn't do a good job at that, you can have like 5 to 10 times the engagement, but not with from real people. So that I mean, not want to accuse anyone. It's just like it's tough to fight that. I'm just saying. So
Yeah, I think to your point about the top 1%, it's interesting, right? Because I think those guys would be successful
yeah,
anywhere, right? Like they could probably they could take their audience to Beehive or Kit or Active Campaign, and they'd be just as successful. They probably don't need Substack to do it. But yeah, I think it makes sense for a small. I mean, we talked about it a lot, but I think it makes sense for like a small portion of folks who are maybe getting started, or it's more of like a personal kind of newsletter, or you're maybe a creator. But I'm still not sold on the fact of people rushing out of Beehive or Mailchimp to go build on Substack. I just don't think that's where people need
yeah.
to
It's
be.
like if the newsletter is a part of your publication, so like you publish a lot on social and stuff, and newsletter is just like one
Mhm.
other relatively small thing, it might be good because it's way easier to set up and just run with it compared to others. Although I think like Kit and Beehive also have done a pretty good job to just like, okay, set up and run with it, especially if you're starting out. But yeah, so for those sort of situations might make sense. But if you want to do like, the next morning brew, you're not going to do it on Substack, that's for sure.
That's a I'm actually curious. I didn't have this written down, so I apologize for putting you on the spot. But I'm curious what your newsletter stack is. What are you guys using over at Stacked Marketer? For ESP, and then like any tools that you're tapping
Yeah, we
into.
still use Campaign Monitor, so we haven't changed it since 2019 now. Because I remember, like, I still have the import date for the list, so January 2019. So for over 6 years, haven't really changed my opinion on it. It's not perfect, but it allows you to build enough things on top of it to make it closer to perfect compared to others from my experience. So um, we still use that. Then we have some custom tools for list cleaning, so like to automatically update segments rather than like us going through that whole segmentation thing in Campaign Monitor, and also to like pull things. Then also for analytics, we had to build a few of our own things. AI came in handy there. So once AI got good with coding, I could put some stuff together as well. So we also like for easier publication, we have, well, like it's a two-part thing. Um, a script in Google Docs that then pushes the content from Google Docs in the right sort of format, both for Campaign Monitor and for WordPress. So it's like easier for us to click publish once, and then it kind of gets like the content we want to publish gets put everywhere close to the final way we want it, just like we double check for categorization and stuff like that, but small things overall. So it's like built a few things on top of that. But yeah, so Campaign Monitor stays our ESP. Main thing is still the it's pretty reliable. So that's one of the things. In the past 6 years, I think they were offline when we wanted to send a newsletter once. And aside from that, it's always like Saturday night to Monday morning. Saturday night to Sunday morning maintenance, or maybe like Sunday morning or something like that. They do maintenance regularly, not every week, but when they do it, they were down when there was that whole thing. Remember with like CrowdStrike, I think it was called, or whatever. So they were affected by
Mm.
that as well. But then again, who wasn't for
Yeah,
that?
I mean the entire
Yeah.
internet
So
was
so
down,
that
so
that
we'll
was
give
that was
them
an
that.
extra one. So like that was not just on them. So I
Yeah.
don't count that one. And they do have a nice feature that they recently added with, I guess they call it bot filter in a way, for clicks. So like they don't count clicks from known firewalls and data centers and stuff
Mm.
like that. That helps us rather than us trying to detect it. They do it for us. So then it helps a lot with our data and like our engagement and stuff like that. But yeah, otherwise
Are they super clear about what that is?
no.
Because I know we talked about it a few times. Yeah, because like I know Beehive has it, and it's called verified clicks, and it's very much a black box. So you don't really know what it is. Like I applaud them for trying, right? But it's not
I
totally
mean, here
clear how
it's
they're
clear
calculated.
enough, but it's like it's not in detail, and I'm not sure how many people really use it because in the end, it
Yeah.
makes your engagement look way lower. So like, I don't know how many people use it, but it is something that I wanted to have anyway. So it's kind of good that they introduced it. That was a couple of years ago already. For Beehive, I heard from a few users, it's like sometimes it's too aggressive. People said, I don't know if it is or not, but a few people said like, "Wow, this the verified clicks is really low for some reason, and what happened?" And I I have a feeling, if I were to guess, that people underestimate how many like firewall clicks they might get, especially if they have a lot of businesses on their
Yeah.
list. So I think Beehive is most likely correct there. But like you said, you don't know exactly what criteria they use, so I can see why people are skeptical sometimes. But just from my experience, because before we had this filter from Campaign Monitor, I also tried to figure it out myself, and I don't think it's not rocket science. I think it's relatively straightforward for like 80% or more of those clicks to detect. So for that reason, I think Beehive is probably also correct and not overstating them, at least not by much anyway. So it's just I think just people are shocked now.
Yeah, some of the numbers are certainly scary to
Mhm.
see. So I want to get into something. One of the we talk about newsletter acquisition and growth quite a bit on this podcast. You obviously know a lot about that. I would say one of the things that we probably haven't talked a lot about is actually acquiring a newsletter or acquiring a
Mhm.
list. So obviously, with the Barstool thing, I was on the other side of it, but I know that you've been the acquirer before and brought some newsletters in. So I would love to talk about that and just be like, kind of break down, first what you bought and just think through, any regrets there, anything that like stood out to you. It was like, hey, if I ever did that again, I would do these things differently.
We bought only two newsletters, so we were
That's more than most
yeah.
newsletters. So
No, but I mean, like, we looked at a few more and we only bought two. And obviously, if you
okay.
look at the newsletter marketplaces, there's still many that are listed, right? So I would say we
Yep.
were picky enough. So for that reason, I can kind of spoil it. No regrets, but of course, some things that I learned. We bought, to kind of put everyone in the loop, we bought Psychology of Marketing, and that was around 25,000 subscribers or something like that back then. Over 20, under 30, something like that. I would have to like check docs and stuff, but there was that. And then we also bought a newsletter called The Funnel, and that one was daily marketing news. So Psychology of Marketing still exists and kind of continues in a fairly similar format to before. So that one is a newsletter we bought that we thought makes sense as related content to what we already do at Stack Marketer. And that's why we continued it, and it's doing pretty well, especially like when you look at sponsor demand compared to, let's say, the average newsletter. So that was pretty encouraging to see over the years with it. And the funnel, since it's something very similar to Stack Marketer, the idea there was buy the newsletter and then just roll it up in our main Stack Marketer list, because it kind of caters to the exact same audience. So that one, I mean, we still have a good amount of subscribers from people who joined that way. So it's okay, but it's not like it's not a game changer, I would say. So the main lesson there is like, if someone didn't sign up for your exact newsletter, the engagement rate will still be pretty low compared to your average, or like not your average, but like compared to your organic and referrals and like the highest value subscribers. But it is,
Right.
comparable to social. Maybe a little bit less if you are very picky with your social targeting and stuff. But it's okay. Like it makes sense. Although churn rate at the very beginning is like, you can spend like 25% to just jump ship in the first month or so. At least for a daily newsletter, which again, not to be discouraging, it's just I think it's normal if you didn't sign up for that exact thing, if something happens. For
Right.
Psychology of Marketing, since we kept it in the same format, it stayed, everything was pretty smooth overall. So, yeah, different lessons and different ideas. For content, I think it makes sense, or like for concept and starting a new concept or a new newsletter with an existing list. Pretty good idea. I think can work well, but you need to know that the list itself is already engaged and people like that content. That was
Mm-hmm.
Psychology of Marketing for us. And then finding a list that,
And
sorry.
how could you just walk me through? could you walk me through that due diligence? Like, how did
Mm-hmm.
you, like, is it, once you started talking to them, you're like, okay, this is probably a good fit. Like, what were the things, like the actual metrics that you looked at? And like, how did you actually, we were just talking about, fake clicks. Like, how did you actually make sure they were real?
Yeah, so one thing that helped was that we did some cross promotions with them beforehand. So we knew, like, okay, you reported this amount of
Mm.
clicks, we've seen this amount of visitors, we've seen this amount of conversions to our newsletter. So, okay, it looks in line with what we know. So it's like, obviously
Right.
there would never be like perfection, but it's in line with everything we know. So let's say the ratios will stay fine within our newsletter too, or like what we know about. So that was the first encouraging point there, that then all the stats that we looked at should be within the same, range of error that we would expect from our own newsletter. And then two things that I looked at, or let's say, like, aside from, you have their subscriber numbers and open rate, but in more detail, was um, creating like the segment of potentially disengaged subscribers to see, like, okay, with this criteria that we have, how many people would be taken off the list to count them as
Yeah.
disengaged. So like, if you're not regularly doing that, we want to see this segment. And then how many clicks sponsored placements get. Obviously, if you never have sponsored placements, that's tough, but in both cases, you can kind of judge a little bit. So we wanted to see a little bit on the engagement on the sponsor side, because that was the main way to monetize. So to see, like, okay, do sponsors get clicks? As I said, since we were did a few cross promotions with them and we were in the sponsor slots, we had some data from that
Mm.
side too. And I mean, funny enough, like, one of the sponsors that came with the newsletter, so to speak, is still sponsoring us now after like 2.5 years or something like that. So obviously, in the end, there was some real and engaged audience that people were looking after. So it did work. But that was probably the first thing, like you said, checking that those clicks are real. Cross promotion, or let's say sponsoring the newsletter yourself first, might be a cheaper way to do it than others, to see how it goes.
Yeah, I know. That's a really interesting takeaway. I know HubSpot Media Network. They've said that multiple times, right? Even before they bought the Hustle or before they bought other podcasts, they said they've always done cross promos or
Sponsored,
just
yeah.
sponsored those places just to see what the engagement is like, and then get some of those lists in a in there. So it's definitely a good way to try it before you buy
Yeah,
it.
I mean, HubSpot can try a lot before they decide to buy. So
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I have so many questions about acquisitions. Tell me, where did you find these? Was it something that was just kind of in your wheelhouse, like you were reading these and you were like, these are great, or did you find these on one of these, networks or platforms that sell newsletters?
Um, we were always looking to do cross promotions, because growing with cross promotions was really good. Even now, the quality is good. It's just like the scale is not so high, but growing with cross
Right.
promotions, definitely a thumbs up for that. So we were looking for those options. Psychology of marketing came through that option, and then the funnel was, I think, me saying on social, like, hey, we're still looking to buy some newsletters, reach out. And then yeah, the founder from that one reached out as well and looked into it, was all right in the end as well. Kind of similar process, but just the thing we wanted to judge was more like, okay, how many people would we get to our core newsletter that way? So didn't look at marketplaces. And I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm not so optimistic about the newsletter marketplaces, just because. Um, so once people post, like, publish something to sell on those sort of marketplaces, very often they seem abandoned. And I would, like, myself, and I know other people, they would not buy a newsletter that's been inactive. So if you if you post it on a marketplace to sell, and then you just think, like, okay, I'm gonna sell it and stop publishing it, every edition that you miss is probably like, a 10% cut in your potential pay, maybe more. And then after 10 missed editions, nobody wants to pay for it. Like, who's still reading it? How do you know that it's still
Mhm.
worthwhile? So I think that that's a big problem, that most of those newsletters that I've seen listed there, they just don't publish regularly anymore. So it's kind of buying a
Got it.
list of disengaged people which, to get into a little bit more of a controversial topic, like at that point, why don't you do the identify visitors thing that people have been doing around? It's like, I think I've been subscribed to like 5 newsletters a month with that technology. So
Yeah, have you tried that yourself?
no, haven't tried it. We thought about it. There was someone who even pitched it as a service, and I was like, nah, it's. I can see the kind of like the appeal of it, but I think it's really tricky to turn someone, just because like I've already seen when you buy a newsletter that people churn.
Wait, can we time out? I'm not sure I follow. What exactly are you guys talking about? Like what
So
technique?
there's this thing where there's some tools that identify visitors from your website. So based on your IP and your whatever other cookies you might
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
set, they identify your email as well, and then you can use that email for
It
whatever.
was really big in e-commerce for a while. It moved into B2B with like retention.com. Started
Yep.
doing it there. They call it like identity of resolution pixel and stuff. Basically, it's if you ever get someone reaching out to you selling you like newsletter subscribers, and all their website, like it has case studies and images of like graphs going up. They talk a lot about intent, and there's like a lot of like words that I don't understand. Like I work in newsletter growth, and I don't understand like 90% of what's on the page. But the one thing that you do know is like they are not telling me exactly where these subscribers are coming from. Like I don't get like it doesn't say like plain English like where are these email addresses coming from, and then basically what it is like they will know from other websites where they have their pixel on it. They will know if someone who is subscribed to another list somewhere in their database visits your page. And there are basically like two. There's like a sleazy and a not so sleazy way of doing it. So like the e-commerce way of doing it was visitor like I land on Stack Marketer's website, for example. Stack Marketer sees my email address. They send me an email saying, "Hey, I saw you checked out the site. You didn't, you didn't put your email address in. Uh, Maybe you would like this lead magnet. Click here to get it, right?" And then that will sort of like opt them in through that flow. And that's the I would say like the less sleazy way of doing it. What I'm seeing a bunch of websites doing it, and like for context, I tested this like a week ago. I signed up for 40 newsletters on Beehive, and five of them, 42, I think, and five of them added me to their list. Like they didn't send me the welcome email even. Like they definitely didn't ask me. They didn't send me welcome. They just added me straight to their list. And that like again, when Manu was talking earlier about, oh, a lot of these people, like a lot of these clicks and all of these opens, like they're surprised that the verified ones are so low. It's because, yeah, just like you've added a lot of people to your list. A lot of those opens and clicks are going to be from bots or machine generated opens and clicks. So like it looks like they're engaged, but maybe they're not really.
We've seen a few of those, but like it didn't make sense. Like I said, like once you see the churn rate on the real subscribers, or like as real as you can kind of guess from other newsletters when you acquire one, then obviously like paid social and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, this is not something that's really worth it. And to be fair, like I think it's not so far off from basically like when you do co-registration, and it's like, okay, you get a prize if you register to this newsletter, but obviously that you don't really necessarily have an interest in this newsletter. So we tried some of those things
Like
out.
the
Yeah,
sweepstakes
yeah. So
things.
like,
Yeah.
but not your own sweepstakes within your newsletter, but it's like with other like scholarships or whatever,
With a
stuff like
hundred other
that.
newsletters.
So it's
Yeah.
like when trying some of those, I think we tried like 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. So kind of in the early days, yeah, the engagement was really, really low overall. So like it basically it's throwing away money. So it's like it feels too similar to that it doesn't really help. Plus on the other side, it you're not looking. I don't know. I know like subscriber numbers and growing is great, but at the same time, if those subscribers are not providing value either for your own business, if you're selling something else to monetize, or for the sponsors, then what's the point? So like in our case, we've seen like, okay, what the return for the sponsors is as well, like return rate from sponsors, like how are they happy with new subscribers, unhappy, or and things like that. Like not everyone is super communicative about that part because they keep some information private. But with those that mention like, okay, we see that even though we're, I think I've mentioned this in a lot of other discussions. Like if you compare us in terms of actual size to other newsletters, we might seem a bit smaller, but then in actual frequency with sponsors and returns from sponsors, we're doing okay. Like obviously we want to keep improving on that, but their approach to try to make it as close as possible to real people does help in the end. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, can we talk a little bit about where Stack Marketer is today? Because then I want to go back and do this fun thing where we sort of walk through and compare how you would regrow Stack Marketer from scratch today versus how you actually did it. So what is like let's take today as like the end goal. What can you share about like subscriber count, revenue, stuff like that?
Yeah, so actually it hasn't changed so much since we last spoke. So we're still around 100,000 subscribers across the 3 newsletters. And then revenue has been pretty flat. Actually, like last year compared to 2023, it even decreased a little bit. So these are, if someone has been following me or Stack Marketer, they probably read the annual report as well. So they get an idea from there. So it's been kind of like a hit the peak type of period in the past couple of years for us in that sense. But I guess I think that's not quite unique from what I've seen. I've heard like others like, yeah, it's been more challenging to just get more sponsor money or engage subscribers either way. But yeah, so, but to the other point, like what to do differently, it's tough to say.
I guess one place to start is like, would you start Stack Marketer again today?
Actually, that's a good
like,
question.
Do you think you can start it today?
That's a really good question. And I would not be so positive. Then again, I wasn't very positive back then. So just to kind of refresh your mind and everyone else listening to this, when starting Stack Marketer, the plan or the idea wasn't like, oh my God, it's going to go to like hundreds of thousands of subscribers and it's going to do this amount of revenue. It was like, okay, I kind of like this style of newsletter that I've seen with Morning Brew and The Hustle. I don't see it in marketing. I want to try to make it for myself. And then if I find the right, let's say, voice, then, share it with a few other people, see if it grows, then see if sponsors want to sponsor it, and then just take it from there. So it wasn't like a multi-year plan. It was like, take it 1 month at a time, see that if the next step is, okay to, let's just confirm that it can be a business. So on that front, it wasn't even then like a plan for success. So where we are now was not exactly planned or expected, but obviously in the meantime things changed and we, expectations changed, goals changed. But starting it right now, I think would be pretty tough for kind of 2 reasons. I think sponsor money is not as easy to come by as before, so monetizing might take longer. So you have to get more creative with how you monetize. I'm sure you guys, I've seen you guys talked about this as well with like monetizing, not just with ads, but having like, post flow of signups and stuff like that, recommendations, etc., like all of these things. But so there's that. And also the competition probably is higher, right? So when we started Stack Marketer, there was not even Marketing Brew. Just to kind of give you an idea that like now, there's Stack Marketer, there's Marketing Brew, there's DTC Newsletter. There's quite a few of other pretty solid publications in the marketing / newsletter type of medium. So would you start another one? I don't know. Back then it felt pretty new. And like literally, like I said, it's not just saying it. It's like I literally looked through like Google, then tried to find others that are this style, but for marketing, and I couldn't find it. So it felt unique enough that it's worth starting.
It's funny, we've been talking to people about this, and I've talked to a couple of people, like one of the founders of Morning Brew, for example, about what would they do if they were founding Morning Brew again today. And they made this interesting point that the next Morning Brew or the Morning Brew they would found today, it probably wouldn't be a newsletter. Like newsletters were kind of almost a cool thing then, and they were new and they were sort of, there seemed to be some potential that people hadn't really sort of like necessarily figured out the business model and the arbitrage potential of Facebook ads and everything then.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, like I always wonder, like, do you think maybe if you were, whatever it is, 6-7 years younger and you were starting Stack Marketer again today with that same experience, do you think maybe it would be like TikToks or like YouTube videos or something else completely? Like maybe it would be a Substack, for example.
Whew. That's a good question. I don't think I would do anything like video related. It's still not, at least me personally. So I think it would be like way too hard to learn to just, be on video all the time in that way. So like to be entertaining and educational. So that would be pretty tough. I think that's a no from the beginning. It's not like we didn't try some video content, but yeah, not that. I think it would still be some written type of content, but yeah, tricky to say. I think, I mean, I can say it
I
now,
love
like
your
just
video
looking at
content.
it, how things are now. I think one interesting thing would be content, like educational content and guides, and how to actually use AI tools in your marketing. I think that's, and not just talk about it generally and broadly, like not just about the features, but like, hey, look, this is what I actually created with AI. This is how it helped me either save time, save money, make more money, whatever. So I think that kind of marketing content might be something that I would look into, especially since I'm, you know, I haven't coded for a living ever, but I've done enough coding here and there to understand how it works. So then with the help of AI to fill in the gaps, I would probably be able to show some, more interesting things, more interesting results.
And we're gonna circle back to that, and we're gonna pick your brains on what you're doing with AI for your own newsletter as well,
Cool.
because that's something we are both weirdly interested in. But let's talk about the early days of if you were doing Stack Marketer again. Let's say you sign up for round 2 of the game and say, okay, we're going to do Stack Marketer again. Same newsletter. I guess, is there anything you wish you could have changed from the beginning about Stack Marketer, whether it's voice, whether it's like a focus more on education rather than the news necessarily to begin with? Anything that you think like, oh, I wish we hadn't got stuck in this track?
So is this
with hindsight?
Go ahead.
I want to add on to that too. I know you raise money, correct?
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you could go like part 2 of that, if you would have done that sooner, or if you do that again, because that's something, again, almost like you acquired a newsletter. I feel like not a lot of people raise money for a newsletter.
So just to kind of put the right context here, like if starting today or going back based on what happened, I think that's an interesting distinction, because obviously I know things I would do differently if I know everything that I know now, and it's like, oh, this thing will happen. Like, there's gonna be COVID. There's gonna be such good opportunities. Make sure you're prepared, kind of thing.
No. So we're talking from today on, summer 2025. You have all the experience of growing Stack Marketer. You can have some of the connections, all of that stuff, but you don't have the money. You don't have the subscribers. You don't have like anything from Stack Marketer. Right? You've got to set it up again from scratch today.
Yeah, we're not talking about you going back to Wuhan in 2019, and stopping COVID, but we'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
I loved it. I had the best time of my life. Don't.
Yeah, I got acquired because of it, so I guess it was okay.
But yeah, so okay, so knowing what I know now, if I would have to start now, that's okay, that makes sense. So I think I would put a little bit less focus on news. Okay. That's probably like one of the things. I wouldn't completely take it out, but I would definitely I would probably make it less of a focus than it was at the beginning for us. Then would definitely keep the voice, or at least have this concept of like having a entertaining but also educational voice that's writing the newsletter in the same direct tone, like a one-on-one. So I think those two things I would still keep. Certainly. So like the voice itself, I think, will still continue to be very important. Then probably as quickly as possible, find something, like I said, in the practical guide thing, which today would be AI related. So something of like, how to do a marketer's job with AI, find some things and show, not necessarily just tell, just show marketers how to use AI to actually the way it actually, in a way that actually works well.
Would you make that free content as well, or is that like
mostly free? So I'm talking now, let's say just the free one. So of course that you can see already how like it can change also the monetization model, because then if you have more practical and more things that create a big win, or like create a win right away for someone who's reading for free, you have more space to dive deeper into courses or community or anything like that. It can still be practical. So rather than not just sponsorships, although even for that, sponsorships will probably still be fine in terms of for the free content. So yeah, that those are probably the biggest things on the, let's say, on the content side. Whether AI stays the main one or not, or maybe you can even go more sub niche with it, right? So you can be only on the creative side of things, how to make certain creatives and with the latest AI tools, how to fix these imperfections that always come up with AI and all that. I've also tried AI, but I'm using it more and more rather than just trying in the last, let's say, 6 months or so. While, a year ago, it was more like, okay, I tried this. This is kind of like, yeah, I can see how it's better, but I'm not going to publish this sort of thing. So that changed in 1 year. Which I think is going to also change even more so in the next 12 months.
How long did it take you to get your first 1,000 subscribers roughly for Stack Marketer the first time around?
I think it was around a month, just say roughly a month.
Okay.
So not too bad. But I can also say how it happened. And I think I would still repeat something fairly similar.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is how it would differ now. So,
and I wouldn't change that first 1,000. I think it was done in a good way overall. And it was fast enough. So what we did and what I would similarly do now is first ask some friends or connections in the industry. You said I still have those. Even then, I didn't have many people in the marketing industry, but I had enough friends from conferences and stuff. I asked them to check out the newsletter, and if it's good, to share it with their audience on social, even though they don't have huge following. Everyone has a couple of hundred friends on Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that. So that brought us, 100 to 200 people in the early days. And then I reached out to, let's call them like second or third degree connections. So friend of a friend who I might not know directly, either ask for introduction or reach out directly myself, who had maybe a list, a blog, a bigger following on social, and just ask them, look, I'm doing this. Is there a way, is there a paid post you can do to recommend me or something like that? So that the first 1,000 did have some ad spend in that way. Funny enough, though, some people, when I reached out to them, they said like, oh yeah, I've seen this from, the second degree connection. I like it. I'll recommend it for free. No problem. So, and back for that sort of stage, every 20 to 30 new subscribers who are very engaged and big fans are very, very valuable anyway. So yeah, those are the steps that I took back then, and I would take similar steps now, because those initial 1,000 subscribers, they gave us useful feedback regularly. So it helped us also build the newsletter, evolve the content, things like that. So I would say, even if you do it now, worth doing it in a similar way.
Kind of the next step of that question, how would you spend your first, let's call it $10,000 on, acquisition?
Well, that's the tougher one, because you have to still balance, like, do you want to figure out a way where you can scale it a lot, or do you want to figure out a way where you get even more ultra engaged subscribers, and can you have those? With the newsletter being the still kind of Stack Marketer with just some changes, would probably still be paid social high on the list, and other newsletters, so like related newsletters. If you have other type of newsletter, maybe something a little bit more broad, I would say recommendations can even be like one of the top 2 channels. So I would still think growth important. The other thing with growth, though, is like, you have to also prepare, like in hindsight with what I know now, prepare as much as you can for tracking churn rate, engagement rate, and all of these things per channel. I think things like Beehive now make it a bit easier. I'm not sure about all the other platforms. I know, for example, Campaign Monitor doesn't make it super easy, which is where I had to also get some help. But once you have it, it's very useful, and it's kind of very important, right? So, because once you start paid traffic, there's many ways where people can find you, but not necessarily like your newsletter. So that's the biggest challenge for paid traffic. I think it's not necessarily which one is the best, but it's more like there's not universally best one. It's more like, can you test a few and then really tell which is the best one for you, so you can continue doubling down on that one. So maybe that's like one of a hindsight mistakes, or to some extent, not sure if it's a mistake or just lack of experience, but like doubling down on what works, super important, but then also being able to tell what works properly, also quite important. And I think, in the early days, and maybe there was also, like I said, a time thing where you didn't have as good of a tool set to work with. That was also a thing.
When you're saying social, I know you're, a B2B newsletter.
No, still Facebook.
Are you guys
still
doing
Meta
anything?
ads?
All Facebook? Have you had any luck on LinkedIn?
We tried LinkedIn, we tried TikTok, we tried Reddit, we tried Twitter or X. It's night and day difference. It's unbelievable, actually. Like, nobody would have expected it to be that big of a difference, to be honest. Everyone that I spoke with was like, I would say surprised to some extent.
So from a pure quantity perspective or from quality or
So, well,
both?
I was gonna say Reddit and X are mostly bots from my experience, and clicks, like not converting to subscribers, just like a lot of clicks that are not real people, or like at least they don't, they bounce quickly or they don't subscribe. So that's pretty.
Are you telling me the people who get 10,000, subscribers from Reddit are lying in their LinkedIn
No, but
post?
the thing is, like, if you have an organic Reddit post, those are really good. But if you just pay ads
Right.
for Reddit, we've not had good experience. It's like all the clicks were just bouncing
Yeah.
quickly from our website, no subscribers. I don't know how they track it. X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, the
It's
same. LinkedIn was a little bit the other issue where the price just never made sense. If you pay like $10, $20 per click for this kind of targeting or some, I don't know, it was just never good that way. But
Yeah.
Facebook still does a good job at targeting, marketing professionals at least in our case. So they can still target B2B, but on their, especially on like, Instagram. So it's just, Facebook is really
Yeah,
good.
I mean, we're all humans, right? So we're all doom scrolling, whether we're
Yeah.
marketers or
I mean, there's
garbage
a
men.
reason Facebook is
yeah.
so big, right? Or like Meta now. They're so like, especially for as a business, I mean, not just for users. It's their targeting is actually really good. TikTok was not awful, but it was not great either. So it was just like, okay, the engagement is lower, the price is a little bit worse. Like if we don't have unlimited money, we're just going to focus on the one that really does best for the cost. So
I've been seeing some interesting stuff on TikTok now with the whole pay-per-views thing. Have you seen that?
oh,
Like the user generated stuff. It's not really hit the newsletter space yet, but it's what's driving app downloads, and like not just B2C like crappy app downloads, but B2B downloads. They have like this funnel which is almost like affiliates, but basically there's a bunch of platforms that do this and help you source the creators. You basically give like and it doesn't, I think with a newsletter it wouldn't work quite as well with just the newsletter sign up. You probably want like a quiz or like
mm,
a free tool or something that's like very clearly related, right? And then you set like a price. So you say, I'm going to pay, and it's normally like between like $5 and $10 per thousand views on TikTok. And you give them like guidelines of what they have to say, what the CTA should be. But then you let
Mm.
the creator have the flexibility of like how they pitch it to that audience and stuff, right? And anyone can apply, but you only pay out once you hit like, you have to hit at least 2,000 or 3,000 views or something to qualify for a payout. So if someone does a terrible video, it doesn't matter, right?
mm-hmm.
This isn't like branded stuff. It's like, hey, I've just discovered this thing, or like I was, I was constantly feeling behind in my marketing job until I found this thing, right? And then they'll go out and do like a really good pitch,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll do a couple of different videos, and you get hundreds of people doing it. And there are some of these like the Bible apps, for example. There's a bunch of Bible apps that have driven millions of downloads in the last couple of months, and they're paying $7 for 1,000 views, and that translates to, you only need 2 or 3 of those 1,000 views
Yeah,
to
yeah.
actually turn into a subscriber for that to work out really well. And they're really qualified because they're actually watching through in a way that they wouldn't watch the ad. They're actually watching like 20, 30 seconds of a pitch from a real human. So I haven't seen anyone do this specifically for a newsletter yet. It's been for apps that also have newsletters, but I am really like excited to see where that goes this year. I think we're going to see that like in a big way through the rest of this year.
Yeah, that can be pretty
It's
interesting.
the,
We did some organic TikTok, like creator influencer marketing, and the main issue there was that creators at some point kind of lost steam in their own account, like their account lost steam, not just them, and
yeah.
that was the main challenge. But I guess this kind of overcomes the challenge because if you don't reach people, you don't pay. So that's definitely very interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting because you go for like 100, or you hope you get like 100, 200, 300 people doing it, and really the results are going to come from like 3 of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
reels or 3 of those tickets where
I
they
mean, it
go
sounds exactly
pretty
like what we
viral,
did
right?
manually,
Yeah.
but we had to like pay everyone
Yes.
and those sort of things. But
Yeah, because you can also brute force this,
Yeah.
right? You can also buy like, there are people who will set up thousands of accounts for you, which requires literally thousands of phones, and then go out and like post them manually. But yeah, I mean, it's still, I think, better than the AI version of doing it. It's just having the real people with the different creativity of like how they do this. And what's really interesting is like nowadays, this is like a legit way that people want to make money. Whereas like 5 years ago, if you would pitch this someone on this, they'd have been like, "Are you insane? No, like $7 for 1,000 views. Like, I'm not doing this. Like, what are you asking me for here?" And now it's like, yeah, this is how we make money in 2025. This is normal. It's
Yeah, it's
crazy.
the number one job college grads want to have.
Yeah.
But no, I love that because I think it, to your point before, it solves like one of the biggest problems, and that's kind of the manual nature of a lot of this stuff, that it just doesn't scale. Something like that where you're working with influencers. Like I did that at the beginning of the water coolest, worked with a lot of influencers, and it was manageable then, and it got me a lot of like strong, strong readers, and super engaged. But it's one of those things you just can't keep up with, and we've talked about this quite a bit too, is doing that with cross promos and other newsletters, right? It just becomes more of an admin nightmare to be able to just continue having those conversations, making sure you're getting everything in. So that's super interesting if it's one of those things where it's TikTok has figured out how to almost make it programmatic in a way.
Yeah, the only thing that sucks is you don't really get attribution as much, because the whole problem with TikTok is that you don't really get that link out. So we've had people replicate this in the past using like their partner links from Sparkloop, but because they're unique, you have to kind of like get the person to then go into the comments, copy the link like manually from the text, paste it in. It's really messy. And the people who are getting good results with this, they're saying search Bible app in the App Store, or go to bibleapp.com, right? As soon as you add /?2345, it's like, no, not going to happen.
Yeah, I can imagine like one thing that could slightly help is just add a QR code type of thing in the video itself. Like, okay, but then might look a bit too much like an ad, right? Like it's very organic when you just tell people search for it. But when you add an actual call to action like frame in the video, some people might be like, oh, you're just not disclosing that this is an ad, and all these things, and yeah. But then again, like I think that's not so bad, as depending on what your name is, because for example, in our case, obviously the most search traffic still comes from the brand name for us for many years now. It doesn't matter what kind of other content we post. We see some flickers of interesting SEO results here and there without really, not really focusing on it, but nothing beats like the stacked marketer query. That's just the one that brings most people to our website for obvious reasons. So I think if you have a clean enough, unique enough name that also ranks, so nobody managed to steal your rank for that name, perfectly fine to do it that way. And you will be able to just, like you said, you can see the difference in organic traffic and subscribers or downloads or whatever. So I think it's still good enough to see if that works or not.
I'm really excited for that. I think that's going to be a huge thing. What else? We're getting off track though, Manu. What else would you do to grow? Would you do anything different monetization wise? I know you said sponsorship's a little bit harder nowadays than it was.
Yeah, but it's still like they're still
maybe
good in the way to get monetization going right away. So I would still probably keep that high on the list. I think it will just be like generally harder to convince people to test your newsletter compared to how it was back then or like not really. It's hard. So that's the challenging part, because if you start from zero, it's harder to prove. But if you're someone who already knows people who spend money on newsletters, and you kind of have good feedback from your audience already, you probably have a slightly easier time to convince them, because people have done newsletters before. So I don't know where the sweet spot is there, to be honest.
Presumably, if you were starting Stack Marketer again today, you would be able to go out and look at all of these other newsletters that now do exist, and say, "Oh, look, who's sponsoring them?" Like that presumably gives you a little bit of a pre-warmed hit list.
Yeah. But I've said this before, and I think maybe people still underestimate it. It's like we got very lucky with the fact that we're a marketing newsletter. Therefore, a lot of people who control these marketing budgets from sponsors read our newsletter, so they just come to us rather than us having to go to them. So I think like. I repeat that very often, but I think even though I say it, I think people underestimate how good that is overall for us, or for someone like myself back then, who doesn't know about how to do newsletter ad sales or anything like that. Having people come to you and say like, hey, actually, I enjoy your newsletter, I want to sponsor it. And then kind of work with you from like, imperfections, or, oh, you don't have this W8 Ben E contract, or like a form to send us. Can you fill it in, please? It's like, what is that? Search through Google and stuff like that. So I think like all things considered, still sponsorships, and should be, like you said, go through other newsletters, see what's going on. Especially nowadays, you can probably look for AI tools who have raised money, because I think those are probably in the best spot. And then if you have, like I said, that kind of AI practicality to your newsletter, not just the news, you can probably do a good job at the very beginning. you probably have to offer, less, or like you have to offer a cheaper spot than you would expect, or like what you've had people offer, 5 years ago to begin with, and things like that. But it should be, yeah, it should be doable. Side note though, what I would say is that just cold emailing might not be the best. Probably like connecting on LinkedIn, going into some groups where people hang out and things like that will probably yield you a few better results, especially when you're early on. You're not looking to scale per se. Like you just want to get your foot into the door, talk to sponsors, get some logos into the newsletter, rather than be like, okay, I'm gonna get 200 sponsors and book myself for the year. That's not gonna happen anyway. So yeah, that's one thing. I think we've had better success with smaller but more targeted approaches, rather than you know trying to put the message out there to as many people as possible.
Something that always comes up when I'm talking to clients or just people in the industry is, what's the threshold that you see when you should start talking to sponsors? Like, so you're, obviously in the B2B space, so it's a lot different than, consumer newsletter like the water coolest. But I guess when did you start reaching out, with Stack Marketer to run ads? And do you think that was right, or would you do it again?
Yeah, I think it was a good way that I thought about it in hindsight as well. So back then it made sense. I think now it still makes sense. The thought process was, well, how much are people paying to reach around 500 to 1,000 marketers at these conferences? And then kind of anchor it to that. And it's like, look, we're 10 times cheaper, or whatever you want to be cheaper compared to a conference. How bad can it be? Why not test it out? And I think that's still it's also pretty fair of a comparison, as long as you actually show good engagement and people realize that, like, okay, it's actually quite cheap compared to going to whatever marketing conference you plan to go to. It's like, yes, you don't have that direct connection to the potential customer that you're speaking with, but at the same time, you're paying, 10 times less, 50 times less. I don't know where you go. And it's like, if you're attending a conference from the US in Europe and you're bringing like 5 people and you're buying a booth and all of these things, a newsletter is peanuts, right? Sponsoring a newsletter is very cheap. So in that sense, I think you can probably use the same anchoring there. And it's just putting it in a perspective, like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like, you don't want to be compared to Facebook ads, because everyone then would say, like, oh yeah, but with Facebook ads, I can just test like $100 rather than your $250 or $500. You seem expensive, and I get the $20 CPM or $5 CPM on Facebook, or like TikTok. Like Louis said, I do the pay-per-view thing where it's like $5 CPM for these things. So once you get put into that bunch, then it's a bit harder. But I think if you compare it, like, look, these are B2B, these are actually, show some good and legit job titles and marketing positions and like companies that they work with, and you're going to be in a better spot than just like, oh, what's the CPM for it? But yeah, of course, not everyone will agree, but it's a good anchoring, I think.
I like that. Were you going out with a pitch, or even in your media kit, and saying like, hey, this is us compared to these conferences, or was that just kind of a conversation piece that you had in your
conversation?
Because I think that's a really interesting angle.
The initial people I reached out to was people that I had met at conferences. So it was more like, hey, we met here, or like, hey, I was a user of your ad network when I was buying traffic. I'm running this newsletter now. Would you be interested? And then if they had objections about the price, I would say, well, look, you paid, and I would know a good, like, I would be pretty clear about how much they had to pay, because I also attended those conferences. You have the prices and stuff, like, you paid 50,000 for this sponsorship to reach 1,000 people. It's not so bad to pay us 500 to reach these 1,000 people, right? So, and like I said, not everyone would say yes to that, but it's close enough to how it's like, it's fair enough.
I like that angle a lot, and that's a good way of reframing it. So just go back to the kind of the original question. What do you think it would literally be, 500 or 1,000 people's when you would start trying to sell ads in a B2B newsletter?
Yeah, the thinking was to have around 1,000 people who would open the newsletter. So around 1,000 to 1,500 subscribers. Like, if it's 800, nobody really cares so much. It's just like, the whole logic was similar to this for conferences, right? So like, make sure you have a big conference on your list or like a significant conference on your list that people would want to attend, and then anchor it to that. I think part of the reason I had this was because I attended conferences before and stuff like that. So um, that's where the idea and thought process came from, just to compare it with that, because I've seen people I've seen companies buy tens of thousands to 100,000 sponsorships and booths for conferences of like 1,000 to 2,000 people. So that's how it felt like, okay, if I compare it to this in the right way, it should give me a starting point at least.
Cool. Should we move over to the Q&A, Tyler?
Yeah, I think we are going to get over to the Q&A now.
Yeah. Cool. Let's move on. Let's do it.